Looks like there's a light at the end of the tunnel as a second COVID-19 vaccine is now in the pipeline. So why aren't the people in charge acting like it? I'll explain. It's time for Hold the Line.
I would recommend to people to not abandon all public health measures just because you've been vaccinated, because even though for the general population it might be 90 to 95% effective, you don't necessarily know for you how effective it is.
Welcome to Hold the Line. I'm Buck Sexton. That was Dr. Anthony Fauci telling CNN's Jake Tapper that Americans must still continue social distancing and mask wearing even after they receive vaccinations for COVID-19. Fauci's pronouncement comes as Moderna becomes the second big pharma company in as many weeks to announce the successful development of a COVID vaccine. According to the company, preliminary data shows the vaccine is 95% effective. Last week, Pfizer announced it was ready with a vaccine of its own that is more than 90% effective in preventing the disease. Despite the good news, the folks in charge and their media allies appear fixated on continuing with onerous lockdown restrictions. Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer announced a slew of new rules over the weekend, including an end to in-person learning at high schools and colleges, the cancellations of organized sports, not including pro sports, the closing of restaurants for indoor dining, and the shuttering of theaters. And that's just the beginning. Here's what Jake Tapper had to say during his interview, that same interview with Dr. Fauci.
We've got to get the vaccine, it's got to be deployed, and we can't abandon fundamental public health measures. You can approach a degree of normality while still doing some fundamental public health things that synergize with the vaccine to get us back to normal.
So not until the second or third quarter of 2021, though. Christmas is probably not going to be possible.
We missed a lot of birthday parties over the last year. I don't think we have to cancel that one, too, on December 25th, do we? Is that really what we're heading for now, folks? The last couple of weeks, they've been telling you, the public health experts, because they've been so brilliant, so astute in their warnings and their analysis. Let's see. They went from don't wear masks and 15 days to slow the spread to wear masks always, even outside. If you don't wear masks, you're basically killing your grandparents. Oh, and make sure you do it outside, and we're going to make sure that we continue this for 9 months, 12, 18, who knows? Now, even after you get a vaccine that may be 95%, give or take, effective, they're going to want you to be walking around constantly masked up. You don't get an end to this stupid tyranny, this uncomfortable, annoying, and as yet scientifically unproven way of stopping COVID-19. I'm just wondering, at what point do we get to say enough is enough? Because I think I'm already there. In fact, I think that a lot more people should be there. A lot of these restrictions fall outside of the government's mandate. As we know, we've just been going along while they prevent church and synagogue and mosque attendance, while they decide that the First Amendment to allow you your rights of worship and allow you free speech and freedom of assembly, those don't really count anymore because there's a pandemic. Says a bunch of governors and the media. The lib media and Democrat governors, but not only Democrat governors, they've been going along with all this. When does it stop? That's what I want to know. Where are the outer limits? If you had told people at the beginning of this that we would be in November talking about a 95% effective vaccine and that wouldn't be enough to stop more lockdowns after a year of continuous rolling lockdowns, people would have said, no, I mean, this is crazy. But they did it incrementally. There's a lesson here, my friends. They've moved the goalposts so many times that we're now all dizzy. The general public feels like anything to make it stop, but what they don't realize is until we stop it, it's not going to change. The Democrats, the statists, the mainstream media, they're in love with all of this power and the constant virtue signaling. That's where you see the hypocrisy coming in. Oh, it's great to be a big mask advocate. You got to wear a mask, they say. And then we find video or photos of them, whether it's Nancy Pelosi or Dianne Feinstein or Schumer or Cuomo or Lightfoot in Chicago, or go down the list, not masking up, while they tell all of us, you better do it all the time or else. And it's more than that. The masking is a symbolism for these public health measures, as Dr. Fauci calls them, that have been adopted More now than ever before, but they're also telling us there are more cases than ever before. Now, that's different than more people dying from this than at the peak, but still, if these things worked, why aren't we seeing those benefits? It's an unfalsifiable proposition. That's what they give you. That's what Dr. Fauci offers up. He doesn't point, he keeps saying the data, but he never tells you what data. The data that shows that in Europe they had lockdowns and now they're having them again? That masking saves you from this virus? Remember, as a policy, that's different from a personal practice. Maybe if you're 100% compliant with masking, it would have some huge benefit for you. I don't know. Although a lot of people who get sick say they masked up all the time and they socially distance. But we've been doing all of that. We still have skyrocketing cases in this country. They also have that going on in Europe. Many countries around the world have been hit with this at a level that shows it's just not possible to really control this virus. As some are saying, the virus is going to virus. Tragic, but true. And now they're telling us that, it's because we haven't done it enough. Well, you'll notice it's never enough. If cases go down, it's because they'll tell us the virus has been suppressed by these measures. If cases keep going up and up and up, they'll tell us, we haven't done enough of the measures we've been telling you to do. You know what real science is? Real science is what's just happened with Pfizer and Moderna. That's right, big pharma companies, private sector, spending enormous sums of money and putting in countless manpower hours to find a vaccine that is going to save a whole lot of lives. And they have to stand behind it. They don't get to say in a couple of months, like Fauci and the rest of these public health experts. They're policy people. It's like putting an MD in charge of your life. If you ask a doctor, hey, should I eat red meat? Should I go do CrossFit? Should I go skydiving? A lot of them will say, no, you don't want to do any of those things. Because what's their one focus? Your health. They don't want you to get injured. They don't want you to get sick. But you want to live life. So you get the advice of doctors, but you, in this analogy, are the ultimate arbiter. You're the policymaker in your own life. And that's the way it's supposed to be. We have handed over because the media's panic, because they knew the only way to defeat Donald Trump with, let's be honest, some third-tier loser like Joe Biden. I don't care if he ends up even becoming the president. If we don't win these recounts, if we don't win these legal challenges, Biden's still a clown. That's never going to change. The only way they were going to get this guy to win was by making sure the country was as shut down and miserable and unfree while Trump was in office as possible, all because of this virus. You think they're going to give him credit right now for the vaccine? You think all of a sudden they're going to change their opinion, their estimation of how effective Trump's handling of this has been? One of the main areas of attack was how inept Trump was in marshaling the resources of the federal government to attend to this challenge, to deal with this crisis. And now we have what is a near miraculous timeline of getting this vaccine out there, just about to be approved. They've already mass-produced stockpiles of it so they can distro it right away instead of waiting 6 to 12 months to make enough vaccine to get to people. But now we're supposed to think that if only we listen to Fauci, that's what the answer is. And they won't give it up even after you're vaccinated. There is no scientific basis whatsoever to claim that a person who is 95% protected against a disease they may or may not have already had, and they may or may not even ever show symptoms for or even be exposed to, is something that now they have to make onerous, annoying decisions every day about their lives. You have to bend the knee, shut down your business when they say so, wear the mask when they say so, do all of these things because of the tiny percentage chance that you might still get this after a vaccine. That's what they're telling you. They're saying it out loud. You also could wake up tomorrow and you could have an aneurysm and die. True of any person watching this. True of me. You could get West Nile virus and die. You could get the hantavirus. Very rare in this country. It happens a few times every year, and that's pretty much all she wrote. People die from it. That's what ends up happening. Are you terrified to go outside? Do you not live your life at all because of that possibility? If we have now changed our risk tolerance as a society such that 95% protection against this virus is not enough, we have completely remade what it is to be an American. We're no longer free. The government gets to make all kinds of determinations about your life endlessly. There could always be a mutation of the virus. It could always come back in some other form. We can't take the chance. Got to make sure you social distance. No more hugs for your loved ones. No more spending time with the people that matter the most to you. Just sit there, let the government send you a check when it feels like. Watch your Netflix and be quiet, peasant. That's the plan the Democrats have for you. And if you challenge it, they'll put forward an army of little blue check MDs on social media to hector you, to mock you and say, oh, why don't you trust the science? Don't you care? Why are you such a monster? Oh, but the BLM protests over the summer, those same people will tell you that was totally fine. That was no problem. That was about public health. We are sick of the crap, my friends. We've seen who these people that are demanding power and authority over us, we've seen who they are. And we don't want to listen, and there isn't a need to listen once this vaccine is in circulation for you as an individual. Get it and forget it. Meaning once you get it, live your life. That's it. That has to be a red line. No more of this. As it is, they're saying, oh, don't have more than 10 people. Biden said today 5 people at Thanksgiving. Don't have more than 5. And make sure that they've already quarantined. And make sure they get tested. And make sure. No one's going to do this. This is madness. They say all this nonsense and then they don't actually follow through on it themselves. I'm going to be with my family over Thanksgiving. I'm going to be with my family on Christmas. If they want to send men with guns in to arrest me because there's 11 of us instead of the required 10, they are welcome to do so. But I'm sorry, I thought we were still in America. Oh, but no, it's because the experts say. Really? There are a lot of experts that say what they're telling us to do these days is utterly moronic and outrageous. But we'll continue to follow this one. We'll have more on the looming COVID-19 lockdowns with talk show host and former Army Special Forces guy Drew Berquist after the break. Fellow patriots, MAGA CBD is a revolutionary American-made product that is safe for work, THC-free, and features patented NASA technology, making it the highest quality CBD oil on the market. Dedicated to providing the purest, most effective products on the market, MAGA CBD provides third-party testing results from industry-leading experts. MAGA CBD is 100% committed to customer satisfaction and product quality. Best of all, 10% of proceeds benefit veterans and first responders. Personally, MAGA CBDs really helped me sleep through the night, something I used to struggle with a lot. You can really feel and taste the difference with their apple pie flavored oil. What CBD product in the market could be more American? MAGA, NASA, apple pie. It's America at its finest. For your CBD needs, look no further than MAGA CBD. Learn more and order today at magacbd.org and save 10% with promo code BUCK. That's magacbd.org, promo code BUCK. Welcome back. As you just heard, the second wave of coronavirus lockdowns is already here. And every day we're seeing more and more states across the country issue strict restrictions. Take a look at these headlines from just this weekend. Oregon and New Mexico order lockdowns as other states resist. Washington governor bans Thanksgiving gatherings, announces new COVID business restrictions, and Michigan enacts new coronavirus restrictions on restaurants, bars, schools. This after major cities like Chicago, San Francisco, and New York City tightened their restrictions in an attempt to curb the spread. But didn't we already go through this? What makes this round of lockdowns different exactly? Here to talk about lockdowns, freedom, and America is Drew Berquist. He is a former veteran of the Special Operations community and host of This Is My Show with Drew Berquist, which makes sense. Drew, good to see you.
Good to see you, Buck. Thanks for having me.
So here we are now, exactly where many of us have been predicting we would be for months and months, when we're told, oh, it's time for another round of lockdowns. Drew, I just want to know, why should we ignore, for example, just the hypocrisy? I mean, Nancy Pelosi was quoted recently as saying that they had a big dinner for new members of Congress in D.C., but they were socially distanced, so that's okay. I mean, it's still a huge gathering. It's completely unnecessary. Here's the mayor of Chicago saying that, yeah, okay, I gathered with the crowd when Biden won, but the crowd was going to be there anyway. Play it.
I think that we've been saying all along, everybody has to take care. Everybody has to take precaution. I will tell you, in that big crowd a week ago, everybody was wearing masks. You can see the shot here. Mask compliance in our city is actually up very, very high. But yes, there are times when we actually do need to have a relief and come together. And I felt like that was one of those times. That crowd was gathered whether I was there or not.
Yeah, you know, COVID's really important, Drew, and it's a life or death situation. Unless you want to celebrate too early an alleged Joe Biden victory, then it's cool. Then the disease doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, it's absolutely insane what you've seen. And I think that the problem here is so much of America has just taken verbatim what the mainstream media, what Democrat officials have said, hook, line, and sinker, and ran with it, despite the fact that most of them have got to have some inkling in there saying, you know what, this doesn't seem right because she's not doing that. You know, it's all this do as I say, not as I do. And, you know, and she's right. It looks like the mask wearing is up in Chicago, but so are the COVID infections, so are violent homicides. I mean, Chicago is a mess. And the hypocrisy that you're seeing from her, from Whitmer in Michigan, from just Democrat leaders across the board is absolutely astronomical. And people should be questioning it. And I don't know why more aren't. It really, it blows my mind.
You're down in Florida. My understanding is that Governor DeSantis, who, if anyone should be writing a book on how to deal with this as a governor, it would be DeSantis and not Cuomo. I think Cuomo should actually be up in New York here, the last governor perhaps to write a book about how to deal with this thing. Are Floridians much worse off now? You guys got rid of restrictions, mask mandates, for example, at the municipal level a couple months ago now.
Yeah. No, look, I think Ron DeSantis has done an outstanding job. He is at the forefront of doing this and doing it the right way. You know, he's ruffled some feathers along the way because the Democrats want to push this fear and panic because they are so committed to always trying to maintain control over the people. But Ron has said, no, look, we're going to do it differently. We're going to do it safely. We're going to do it smartly. And he's done a heck of a job. And for the most part, you know, look, there's people down here who are still scared. There's people who are, you know, vulnerable or susceptible and have a condition. That's fine. You do you. But for the most part, everyone else is eager to get back out, get the economy going, spend the holidays with their family, which I know Fauci and others don't want us to do. But Florida has, I think, been a model. And are there spikes here and there? Yeah. But I think in general, this is the playbook right here.
Governor Cuomo, as I mentioned before, has written a book on what he views as his extensive leadership victories during this period of time, with the highest per capita death rate, I think, of any state in the country, with the possible exception of New Jersey next door. Governor Cuomo has had the worst single record. But there's also this back and forth now, Drew, over the vaccine. We've gotten great news, right? Last couple of weeks, over two vaccines, one with Pfizer over 90% effective, the second with Moderna over 94% effective, blowing away expectations, which were 60 to 70%. And that would have been considered good, a 60 to 70% effectiveness for any vaccine like this. And so now we have a fight between at least one governor and the president over whether or not the vaccine is safe because President Trump is in office and the FDA is during his, it's happened during his tenure. Here's the governor of New York referring to this dispute and calling Trump a bully.
With me, he tries to bully people. He tries to bully governors. He uses government as a retaliatory tool. And as you know, Wolf, New Yorkers are not going to get bullied. I stand up for New Yorkers, and I'm not going to let a bully push New Yorkers around, period.
So what he means by that is that he's going to have a state panel of experts after multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical company Moderna and the FDA have said this is absolutely safe for mass public usage. He wants to have his experts look at it because he doesn't trust Trump. I mean, to me, Drew, this is peak Trump derangement syndrome.
No, it absolutely is peak Trump derangement syndrome. It's peak arrogance. And it's also, I think, just flat out lazy, the way that he and other Democrat leaders, whether it's, you know, Kate Brown in Oregon, you know, the way they've handled stuff there, Gavin Newsom, whoever, fill in the blank, they've all kind of been in that same category. None, as you said, worse than Andrew Cuomo. But they refuse to give him a win, which is, yes, it is a win for President Trump on a political level, but it's a win for America. This is what people want. This is what we rushed to get through. And now the fact that it's happening on his watch is so depressing to them. And he's gone out this week and he's talked about how he needs to own up to, President Trump needs to own up to his mistakes, be accountable for them. This guy who will not acknowledge his own mistakes, who has a disastrous record in New York and how he's handled the virus. So it's it's the epitome of how these people act, how they say. But again, the sad thing is there's people who watched that clip on CNN and have watched some of the other things that he said this week and throughout this year and said, yeah, Cuomo's right. And they've taken that side when it just couldn't be further from the truth.
Drew, are you a little surprised at how many Americans up to this point have really pretty meekly gone along with all of this stuff? Don't wear a mask, 15 days to slow the spread turns into 9 months, maybe 18 months to slow the spread. Who knows? Wear a mask forever. Wear one outside. There's no actual scientific data anywhere to support that. Are you surprised, or should we have expected this? We thought we're a nation of lions. There's a lot more sheep running amongst us.
No, there really are, and I think that you would like to be surprised. You would like to think that, but you see how people have voted, how they've responded to other stuff on a much lower level, lesser degree over the years, and it's really not. I mean, when you think of the fact that how much control big tech, mainstream media has, how they can push out the narrative that they want, and how eager people are to consume it and not really think. I mean, people live in a world of sound bites and video clips these days. So if that's all they're hearing, they're gonna take it and run with it. And you've had people in the past who would push back a little bit, but not really do much with it. I think that number is growing now. Is it enough? I don't know. But I will tell you this: if you don't push back about this stuff, whether it's COVID, about questions with the election, whether they're true or not, if you don't at least ask the question and try and get to the bottom of it, it could be the last time you get to do it. So it is so imperative that people stand up for what they actually believe in, and first, taking a step back, know what they believe in, because right now it's crazy times out there.
Drew Berquist. This is My Show with Drew Berquist. Check it out, everybody. Drew, great to see you, man. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Buck.
Thousands of Americans marched on Washington, D.C. this weekend in support of President Trump, a fact that seemed to go unnoticed by most of the media. We'll take a look at what went down when we come back. These days, being prepared for the unknown is more important than ever. What's the stock market going to do next month, next year? Do you know? Nobody really knows. I'm sure you've noticed the world we live in is anything but predictable when it comes to your money and the future of the economy. We could all benefit from something reliable right about now. What could be more reliable than real gold and silver? I'm talking about real gold and silver you can actually hold right in your hands. Call the Oxford Gold Group now. Learn how easy it is to get real gold and silver sent securely directly to your home, or how you can have real gold and silver placed in your IRA or 401k. Just call the Oxford Gold Group at 833-600-GOLD and ask for your free guide on owning gold and silver. Again, call the Oxford Gold Group right now at 833-600-GOLD. The Oxford Gold Group is the only gold company I trust. Call them right now at 833-600-GOLD. One more time, that's 833-600-GOLD. Check them out today. Thousands of Trump supporters descended on Washington, D.C. this weekend in a show of support for the president. There was no rioting, looting, or violence from the MAGA folks. Instead, they engaged in peaceful protests. You know, that long-standing American tradition that is sacred to us. It's enshrined in the First Amendment. Imagine that. Some people still do that, apparently. In this case, the president's supporters were marching against what they perceived to be an unfair, a tainted election, and we're still finding out more answers about how accurate those allegations are, how far the irregularities really extend. While leftists typically burn down communities when they don't get their way, the Trump supporters instead sang the national anthem. Well, the president's supporters were... That's how the president's supporters were going about their evening. But there were countless scenes, of course, you know what's coming, of attendees who were peaceful all day. There were no stores looted or burned down and none of that craziness that we saw all summer. But Trump supporters were viciously attacked and harassed by mobs of masked ANTIFA and BLM radicals. As usual, they attack only when they have the numbers, usually 30-1, and they always attack those who are the least capable of defending themselves. Let's take a look at the left-wing violence in today's Buck Brief. So it doesn't matter if you're somebody who's just minding their own business as you walk down the street. You may be attacked by ANTIFA, by BLM activists. If you're anywhere near a Trump march, it becomes a much more serious threat to you. We saw lots of this over the weekend. Now, is it surprising to you to know that none of this appeared somehow on CNN, MSNBC, some of these other cable news channels? They just didn't have any room. They have plenty of space for their columnists and their talking heads on TV to tell everybody about how fascism is coming to America, but far less interest and certainly not enough time, not enough resources to show you that there were Trump supporters being attacked. Here was an elderly man being attacked by Biden voters.
Get out of our space! Get out of our space!
Don't touch him. Don't touch him.
Get the out of here! Get off of him! Get off of him!
Don't touch
This
him.
guy, get out of here! Get out of here! Right along.
Let him go.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Get off and get the out of here. You better run.
That's just too commonplace all the time these days. You have these mobs that gather, they scream profanity, they'll shove you, they'll hit you. There was a family. You're not going to see this anywhere else in the news. I feel like you should see this. We pulled this together over the weekend because the major networks, like I said, they're much more worried about how Trump is turning America into a fascist state, some other nonsense that only morons really believe. But here you go. You got a family that was attacked by these Biden voting lunatics. Play it. Harassing somebody walking down the street with their kids. That's really what social justice is all about, apparently. I mean, there's just so many of these. You had a young couple that was attacked. Play it. Greatest concentration of cowardly beta males you'll find outside of an MSNBC watch party is any Antifa gathering anywhere across the country. I can assure you of that. They're very tough when there are about 30 of them, and there's one person, maybe two people, who they have targeted for not sharing their political views. Perhaps they were at a pro-Trump rally. Oh, good heavens. You support a fascist, so we can punch Nazis. That's what they say. Remember that? The Nazi punching craze? Of course, they're not Nazis, they're just Americans, including the 72 million or so, give or take, we're still counting some of those votes, who voted for Donald Trump in this last election. Is there any sense of remorse on the side of these leftists? Is there any sense from the mainstream media that the demonization of Trump and all of his supporters has resulted in this kind of hatred? No, they don't care. In fact, they like it. Good for ratings, they figure. Plus, they love looking down on such a large segment of the country, thinking they're smarter and better than them. And so if some people have got to get punched in the face for no good reason, the liberal media is not particularly upset about this at all. In fact, some of them cheer this on. They have no problem with it whatsoever. Or they'll say it happens on both sides. No, it really doesn't. I think we're past that false equivalency. I think we're past the point where we have to pretend that this is equal on the left and on the right. The lunatics that are violent, the lunatics that attack people, that want to burn down buildings and stores, they're liberals, folks. 9 out of 10. Probably more than that. Just see what happened all summer. There are some who like to get into a scrap. I said 9 out of 10, so the 1 out of 10. You got the Proud Boys versus Antifa. Some fists were thrown. Play it. If at the March for Science, remember that? Wasn't really about, it's just an anti-Trump march with a bunch of people who haven't read any science since the 6th grade. But if the March for Science, let's say, which was really just Democrats supporting other Democrats, if there were Trump supporters mobbing them and attacking them in the streets, don't you think that would be a big news story? If you had the Women's March, let's say, and there were all these counter-protesters who were throwing, eggs and rocks and things, wouldn't that just be a story that would turn into the dawn of fascism in America, according to the mainstream media? And rightly so. But when it's Trump supporters who are being attacked at night, notice it doesn't really happen during the daytime the same way, the media goes, tough country, what can you do? This is why the mainstream media deserves to be nuked from orbit. It's the only way we can be sure. The Trump campaign continues to fight it out in the courts. Up next, we'll talk about the latest developments with attorney and commentator Rogan O'Handley, D.C. Drano, better known as. Stay with us.
It is your job to put the country first and think beyond your own ego and your own interests and your own disappointments. My advice to President Trump is if you want, at this late stage in the game, to be remembered as somebody who put country first, it's time for you to do the same thing.
In your view, it is time for him to concede?
Absolutely. I think it was time for him to concede probably the day after the election.
Former President Barack Obama lecturing President Trump in a new 60 Minutes interview, pressuring him to concede, including right after the election when nobody thought that Trump should concede right away. But anyway, that's probably not going to happen. As the Trump team gears up for another week of legal battles, the president tweeted yesterday, Biden only won in the eyes of the fake news media. Lovely all caps. I concede nothing. We have a long way to go. This was a rigged election. Also all caps. The president's attorney, Rudy Giuliani, making the case on Fox News yesterday. The campaign does in fact have evidence to support their claims of widespread voter fraud, remaining confident that the election will be overturned. So where is this evidence? Let's bring in commentator and attorney Rogan O'Handley, the man best known as the guy behind DC Drano all over the conservative internet. Great to see you, Rogan. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me on, Buck.
So let's start, my friend, if we can, with, before we get into the specifics about different challenges in different states and how you see it going, and the fact that, of course, Barack Obama somehow knew before any of the networks even called it that Trump should have conceded to Joe Biden. We'll put that aside. Where's the fraud? You seem pretty confident, based on your public commentary on this one, that we're going to find some fraud. What makes you think that?
Well, the fraud is in the statistical data. It is extremely unusual and, in my opinion, evidence of fraud when hundreds of thousands of ballots are found for one candidate and almost zero for the other in the dead of night after we were told people were going to stop counting. Very shady. This is stuff we see in, third world countries. And now we are learning that Dominion software, voting software, which was shot down by Texas and other states for not being up to speed in terms of its security, was used in a lot of these battleground states where the votes, there's a lot of statistical anomalies that were all in favor of Joe Biden. So that, in addition to Pennsylvania, where they have just or will be filing suit this week, hundreds of thousands of mail-in ballots were counted after Election Day in violation of state law, which some Pennsylvania judges tried to overrule right before the election. but the Constitution is very clear that these ballots, hundreds of thousands of them, are unconstitutional. And I'm hoping that the Supreme Court, in at least a 5-4 decision, votes to throw them out. Otherwise, we are incentivizing lawlessness.
President Trump tweeted out the following about the Georgia recount that's already been happening. The fake recount going on in Georgia means nothing because they're not allowing signatures to be looked at and verified. Break the unconstitutional consent decree. Rogan, what's going on here?
Well, there's a very close race in Georgia, and President Trump is right that the consent decree may be unconstitutional. It was a legal agreement entered into by the Secretary of State of Georgia, who is a Republican, before the election. And again, it controverts established state law on election procedure. What we're seeing across the country, especially in these battleground states, are these equitable adjustments to state law in light of the COVID dynamics we're seeing across the country. Those were the justifications that were used to enter into these, non-state law agreements. And the Supreme Court is going to be taking a look at them. The Constitution is very clear. Only the state legislature can set election law. And so when you have these state level bureaucrats and other people entering into these agreements that circumvent state law, in my opinion, we're going to find out that those are unconstitutional. And the amount of ballots it affects, especially in a close race like Georgia, could ultimately turn the state back in the Trump column.
So part of this then, just for everyone to be clear, as you're talking through this, part of it is that the unconstitutional actions in states based on what they felt were COVID exceptions could result in a court saying, sorry, you weren't allowed to do that in the first place, and then they would toss out all these ballots. Do you think that there are courts that might be willing to do that, even if that's what the law says?
Well, we're going to find out. I tend to think that the Supreme Court is more removed from the local hysteria in each state that may pressure them to decide a certain way in light of, what we're seeing, intimidation and threats against some of the Trump team's lawyers. One of their firms actually had to step down because of the intimidation and threats. But the Supreme Court, especially with ACB in a 5.5 to 4.5 majority, Justice Roberts is a little wishy-washy. I do tend to think that these types of decisions will overrule some of these bureaucratic decisions. And, you don't have to overturn too much of this. Not too many votes need to be thrown out, but we cannot have a system that incentivizes regulations and statutes that go around what the Constitution allows. And if we were to allow these types of votes, it sets an awful precedent for the future. So I think these justices are looking at the long-term picture, and they're going to decide rightfully that the Constitution was violated and that these ballots received after Election Day especially are not legal.
So you also had the MAGA march over the weekend. Were you in D.C. for this one, Rogan?
I was not. I was in Wyoming speaking to the national summit of young Republicans, all their state leaders, tremendous people. It was a tough decision, but I did believe that talking to state leaders, especially in these battleground states, was a very good use of my time and resources.
Because I know usually you're on the front lines of all things MAGA, especially at an event like this where you had so many thousands and thousands of people coming together across the country. I'm sure you saw some of the footage from the what people were calling the Million MAGA March over the weekend, and there was some violence that occurred. Not a surprise, but it was violence directed at Trump supporters from Antifa types. And here you go. Daytime, it's Trump supporters. Everything's fine. Everyone's peaceful, law-abiding, First Amendment. That's what's going on. Nighttime, all of a sudden, the Biden voters, a.k.a. Antifa, show up, and the mayhem breaks out. Rogan, what's going on?
Well, we all know that they weren't boarding up the windows because Trump supporters were going to riot. In fact, we've seen 2 weeks now of, dealing with a fraudulent election and have yet to see one, riot or disturbance from Trump supporters. It's clearly from these leftist radicals that are being condoned by not only Joe Biden, but the entire fake news media ecosystem. And, there was over 100,000 Trump supporters marching in D.C., marching to say that they're upset. They know that this election was rigged and that we need to have illegal ballots thrown out. But these Antifa people, I mean, they're by definition terrorists. They're using violence and intimidation to attack Nana and other moms with kids in their strollers. I mean, it's you want to talk about who's deplorable? It's the people in the ninja costumes attacking people in the streets.
DC Drano, aka Rogan O'Handley. Rogan, great to see you, man. Thanks so much for joining.
Thanks for having me on, Buck.
All right, coming up in just a second here, we've got our daily roundup of left-wing lunacy. You know what this is. The Buckshot. It's next. My friends, our constitutional republic has rarely faced the perils we do today. Mob rule, the big push for socialism from the left, violence, suppression of our basic freedoms. Edmund Burke said it well, all it takes for evil to prevail is for good people to do nothing. If you want to help preserve America right now, while we still can, join AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens, the fastest growing conservative group in America. Joining AMAC gives you access to money-saving benefits, cutting-edge news, and a great bi-monthly magazine. But more importantly, AMAC fights for you. A socialist storm is brewing. If you care about our future like I do, then join AMAC today. Over 2 million constitutional conservatives like you and me have already joined AMAC. Stand with us by joining right now. Go to amac.us/buck. That's amac.us/buck. The benefits of AMAC membership are great, but the cause is even greater. Join today at amac.us/buck. Cross-dressing becomes a hot topic on Twitter. Bernie Sanders gaslights America on calls to defund the police, and Cuomo, Governor Cuomo that is, has some advice that he himself does not follow. It's all up in tonight's Buckshot. Let's start with the Cuomo, Governor Cuomo, the worst response to the pandemic of any elected official in the country. I think you make a very strong case that it is, in fact, Governor Cuomo. You can also make a case this guy's only governor because his dad was governor, so he had the right last name, and people gave him this job, and we are, unfortunately, those of us who live in New York State like I do, are suffering the consequences as a result. But he takes gaslighting to whole new levels. Doesn't matter how offensive whatever he says is. Doesn't matter how absurd it is. He wants you to know that he is the best when it comes to leadership, self-reflection, and you don't listen enough to him. That is the problem. He says stuff like this. Play it.
The key is to be strong and secure enough to admit your mistakes and admit your shortcomings. Don't get defensive. Denying the mistake only assures repeating the mistake. We have made mistakes during COVID. I wrote a book on the lessons to be learned from the COVID crisis. I think of COVID as low tide for America.
Notice how he says, we've made mistakes, and then transitions to, well, I wrote a book about the lessons learned about COVID. What mistakes did he make? I don't know, maybe putting people who are COVID-positive senior citizens into nursing homes, even though anybody with a brain would have known right away that was incredibly dangerous based on the early data about who is at highest risk from COVID. But so now they try to cover this up. You know what they do in New York? Cuomo does not count people who died in the hospital but were in nursing homes in the official count of nursing home deaths. That's what they're trying to do, to play games with the numbers to show that the disaster was not as bad as it actually was. But if he's going to talk to us about mistakes that were made, I'd like to know what mistakes he thinks he's made. He wrote a book, friends. He had time to write a book while his state is still very much struggling through this financially, socially, health-wise, in every respect. But this is what you get with Democrats. It's an obsession. Ultimately, the party has an obsession with virtue signaling and hypocrisy. Show everybody how great you are, how virtuous you are, how you always do the right thing. You know what to do. Tell everybody else. Make them do it. Bother them, badger them, get up in their faces. Where's your mask? But then when they catch you without a mask, what am I going to tell you? I got a busy thing. I got a lot of things I got to do. I got a lot of stuff. That's Democrats in the pandemic. They've really been exposed in a way that I don't think any of us will ever forget. All right, on to a different issue. It's certainly a different issue. Vogue says, and they had it on the recent cover, I don't know anything about these fashion. I don't even really know these things still exist. Apparently they do. Now they really just generally put celebrities on the cover instead of models. There's so much joy to be had in playing with clothes. I've never thought too much about what it means. It just becomes this extended part of creating something. Read our full December cover story with Harry Styles. So this is the cross-dressing for men is sexy and in style now. That's what we're supposed to take, and that's what Harry Styles is telling us. Now, this is part of a broader trend. A lot of people have identified as an assault on traditional masculinity in society. It's real. People will mock you when you say that, oh, you're such a tough guy, aren't you? No, it's the traditional masculine virtues and way of being is now constantly being challenged. In fact, by the very people who will say, oh, you're so masculine. Okay, well, what is masculinity? What are we aspiring to? As men in American society, what does it mean? I will say Candace Owens had a very strong response with this one on Twitter. She wrote, there is no society that can survive without strong men. The East knows this. In the West, the steady feminization of our men at the same time that Marxism is being taught to our children is not a coincidence. It is an outright attack. Bring back manly men. This country was largely built by and certainly defended by manly men over a very long period of time. And this should be something, speaking of virtue, that we could all celebrate, right? Men who are courageous, who are decisive, who are selfless, who act to protect their families, their country, their communities. Isn't that something that we should all be in favor of? Oh, but we also need to celebrate when men dress up as women and pretend that this is appealing. I've got to tell you, I've never met a woman. I know there are plenty of them all over social media who, because they're trying to advance their media careers, will say, oh, a guy dressing up in a woman's wedding dress that's sexy. And if you challenge this, they laugh at you. The sneering imbecile squad from Berkeley and Brooklyn will start laughing, hee, like you don't, oh, he doesn't understand how cool it is to wear, a dress that looks like it belongs on Queen Victoria, because all the ladies love that. When you point out that's silly, they laugh at you. That's the society. And these are the hip, these are the cool people. This is the left now. This is what they do. Candace Owens came up with another, because she got all over the place, people attacking her for this one, and she does not give ground. It's one of my favorite things about her. She does not back off. She says, mining pictures on the internet of men in dresses is not going to suddenly make me attracted to men in dresses. I'm impervious to woke culture. Showing me 50 examples of something won't make it any less stupid. And then somebody wrote, Candace Owens is 50 years behind on culture and education. Here's Iggy Pop, David Bowie, and Kurt Cobain all cross-dressing. Yeah, they cross-dressed for attention. They didn't do this in their normal day-to-day lives as a way of being. And even if they did, that's a couple of guys. Who really cares? But now we're in a society where there is no truth, and all truth must always be assaulted, and those who try to uphold truth become targets themselves. That's what the left gives you, friends. That's the whole point. That's the game they play. Speaking of no truth, remember all the stuff about defunding the police over the summer? I mean, I heard it many times. You probably heard it too. Defund the police. That was the chant. Thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of Biden voters who were running around saying, defund the police. You say, that seems like a catastrophically and monumentally stupid idea. Nobody could really want to do that, right? No, friends, it turns out there are people going around with that belief. They really think that that's real. But Bernie has now realized that that's a little bit of a political liability, Bernie Sanders. So he, now that you may, emphasis on may, have a Biden administration coming into office, they want to walk away from the craziest wokeness on police. So here's Bernie talking about this. Play it.
Yeah, let's rephrase that. Nobody I know who's running for office talks about defunding the police. What we talk about is making police officers accountable, making sure that police departments do what they can do best, figuring out how you deal with mental illness, how you deal with homelessness, whether those are in fact police responsibilities, making sure that police officers are not killing innocent African Americans. That is not defund the police.
I mean, he's just making stuff up, folks. We all know that they were talking about defunding the police. In fact, they cut $1 billion of the NYPD budget as part of the defund the police concession. Minneapolis City Council voted to defund police there, and then they realized, oh gosh, our crime goes up. These people are nuts. Unfortunately, in a pandemic year, enough Americans were convinced to trust the Democrats that we're even in this position where we need recounts. But we will continue to fight. We will continue to hold the line. Up next, the No Spin News with Bill O'Reilly, Shields High.